Hey guys, welcome to the Doula Diaries. I'm Heidi. I'm the host of the Birth Story podcast, which drops birth story episodes and expert interviews every Thursday. I'm also the author of the Birth Story Pregnancy Guidebook and Journal. It is everything, 529 pages of everything that you need to know to prepare for your birth. You can get that at birthstory.com. And I am also the content creator for Birth Story Academy, where you go for online learning from a virtual doula. You can also get into my private Facebook community through Birth Story Academy. And here on Tuesdays is where we meet for Doula Diaries. So welcome. Hey guys, just here to talk to you about Birth Story Academy. Are you one of the 98% of birthing people planning to birth in a hospital and you have no idea what you want and what the hospital's protocols and procedures are, how to navigate them, and how to advocate for yourself? We often think about, do we want an unmedicated birth or a medicated birth? But there's so much more to it. What about a cesarean section? What about a wait and see attitude? So if you are one of the 80% of people hoping to birth without an epidural, but know that 60 to 90% of the United States population actually births with an epidural, and in that statistic, 35% of all birthing persons have a cesarean section, whether it's planned or unplanned, that is why I built Birth Story Academy. Birth Story Academy is premier childbirth education for getting you prepped to birth in a hospital. You have over 50 decisions to make when you are in prodromal labor, early first stage, late first stage, hard labor, transition, pushing, the third stage of labor. As a doula for over 17 years, I have witnessed every minute of labor, from the earliest twinges and feelings through every single stage of labor, through transition, through delivery, and into the postpartum period with my clients. In Birth Story Academy, we break down every stage of labor. If you join Birth Story Academy and come on a journey with me, I become your virtual doula, and I help you plan and prepare for the birth that you want, no matter what that looks like. So if you're hoping for that unmedicated birth, I'm going to help you with those plans. If your journey takes a different path, we have plans for that too. You will feel educated and empowered, whether you have spontaneous labor or an induction or a planned or unplanned cesarean, regardless of what you are desiring for medicated or unmedicated or a wait and see attitude. This course walks you through everything you need to know to prepare and to navigate hospital policies and procedures and to create birth plans that advocate for you. So let's do this. Year after year, 71% of my clients go unmedicated, 25% are induced, and a small 7% or less have a planned or unplanned cesarean section. That's the experience that built Birth Story Academy that's going to help you too. So let's do this. Head over to birthstory.com and enroll in Birth Story Academy today. Hey guys, I recently went disc golfing with my youngest son, Jagger, who, as I record this, is 6 years old. So that means 4 years ago, he was diagnosed with cerebral palsy from a birth injury. And I wanted to come to you with my story because I can't go backwards. So if you haven't listened to episode 88, where I talked to CEO Catherine Cross from Anja Health about cord blood and tissue banking. You see, her brother had cerebral palsy too, and we really bonded about how her brother and my child, their lives could be completely different if they had access to stem cells from cord blood and tissue banking. When I was pregnant with Jagger, it was a simple question in a brochure like, hey, do you want to do public or private cord blood banking? And no one explained it to me. As I watched Jagger play disc golf and switch from his right hand to his left hand and watched him kind of limp through the course, I thought I would have paid any amount of money to have had the opportunity to have my child have a stem cell transplant from cord blood that I had saved from his birth. $35 a month, and I may not be watching my kid have to switch arms on the disc golf course. So I hope you will go to anjahealth.com and consider cord blood and tissue banking, because we just don't know. This is policy that you have to decide on in advance, and we can't work backwards. If there's a birth injury, if your child has leukemia, or any of the other 85 diseases that are FDA approved, that stem cells from cord blood and tissue banking can help dramatically save or change your child's life. Hey guys, it's Heidi. This is episode 108, and it's actually Doula Diaries number 6. And I have decided that I'm going to lay here in bed with my AirPods on recording, and I'm not going to edit this episode. And the reason is because I just had a mommy makeover. So I'm on day 3 post-op. So just getting up makes me a little bit dizzy and short of breath. And I really want to give you some information for Doula Diaries, but don't have the time or the energy with my recovery. So I had a breast reduction and I had a tubal ligation, and I am going to talk a little bit more about that on Thursday in a pre-recorded episode. But this episode I'm recording live so that you get it on Tuesday for Doula Diaries. I was going to tell you about my week this week leading up to the surgery. I had 4 births that I attended and even worked 14 hours straight the day before surgery. So I just didn't have a lot of time to rest or, prepare my body. But one story in particular, I think there's a lot to learn from, and it's about prodromal labor. So on page 40 in the Birth Story Pregnancy Guidebook, I talk about prodromal labor, and I'm just going to read you an excerpt. Helping couples to differentiate between Braxton Hicks, prodromal labor, and active labor is one of my hardest jobs. Prodromal labor exists somewhere in between Braxton Hicks and active labor. For many weeks leading up to your birth, you may experience episodes of practice contractions. These sensations of tightening or cramping are infrequent and sporadic. Prodromal feels a lot like Braxton Hicks, which are practice contractions, but they don't end, or they don't end for a while. The tightening or cramping sensations can last for hours, days, weeks leading up to active labor, but they never really grow stronger, longer, or closer together. When you are in active labor, your contractions will grow stronger, last longer, and get much closer together. So knowing the difference is important. Just ignore them, whatever they are, until you can't ignore them anymore. You keep doing your life until you're doing labor. Does that make sense? So I wanted to tell you about my client NB. So NB had all these plans, including at 41 weeks, or right before she gets engaged, gets married at I think it was just at the jail in her local county. And she basically had like mentally put out of her brain that she could not give birth before 41 weeks. She just had too much going on with work and personal stuff. So as soon as we hit that 41-week mark, and like the marriage was complete and the engagement was complete and all of the things, like Colin and I knew, like, oh my gosh, she is going into labor soon. So I wanted to walk you through what her prodromal looked like, because she didn't give birth until 42 weeks. Okay. So that last week was a lot of prodromal labor, like contractions every single day, like wanting to call your doula every single day, wondering what in the world is going on here. So on November 17th, she started her prodromal labor, and she didn't give birth until I think the 28th of November. Okay, so let's talk about this prodromal labor. She would text almost every day saying she felt crampy. Okay, so she felt her belly tightening and loosening, but she also felt really just crampy. She would say, we would check in, and she would say, no mucus plug, no additional vaginal discharge, no extra pooping, no bloody show. So we were like, okay, body is just warming up.
So this goes on. We hear from her every day from the 17th, 18th, 19th, 20th, 21st, all the things. Then on the 23rd, after having, 5 days of prodromal labor, she has a non-stress test and an ultrasound and refuses a vaginal exam because she was like, there's not really a point. I'm 41 and plus weeks and I'm not in labor, so why would I get a vaginal exam? So she refused it. And in that non-stress test, this baby was measuring very big. So, my pep talk to her when they said her baby was probably 10 and a half pounds was like, so what? I had a 10 and a half pound baby out of my vagina, and you're so much taller than me. I mean, she had like probably 6 inches on me. I was like, if my little 5'3" frame can hold a 10 and a half pound baby, yours can too. But we had a serious pep talk. She wanted an unmedicated birth, but we had a serious pep talk as to like why an unmedicated birth could reduce her chances of shoulder dystocia, a broken clavicle, a baby getting stuck, increasing her risk of a cesarean section. So, like, we really had trained for an unmedicated birth, but like we retrained and re-prepared and re-prepared, if that's even a saying, when she got to 41 and a half weeks. Like, yep, your baby is going to be big, who cares? But much easier to get your baby out squatting, walking, moving, lunging when you have a big baby and they're worried about shoulder dystocia when you're unmedicated. So that Friday, she goes back to see her midwife. And at this point, we had made a plan because it was a weekend. And it was also right before 42 weeks. So it was like, okay, let's do a membrane sweep and the midwives brew, which I'll put in the show notes, and some blue Cohosh. These are all things that come from her medical provider, like in the message portal they'll send to the client, but are considered natural induction methods. So I talk a lot about natural induction methods on page 156 in the book, and also I think it's episode 22, the natural induction methods podcast episode. So this midwife does a really good sweep. She sweeps her 3 times. She's a stretchy 3 centimeters, baby's -2. And the midwife reports that she's got a really fragile, like bulging bag. Now, why I wanted to bring that up is because on page 240 in the book, I write about membrane sweeps and how 9% of the time the provider can accidentally break your water while doing a membrane sweep. So it's really important you know that call out that anytime we consent to a membrane sweep, that is an induction. We are actually starting the induction process. And at 9% of the time, it can result in your water breaking accidentally. So thankfully, even though my client had a fragile bag, it didn't break and it was really effective. So our plan was you get the sweep, that gets things going. Then you go home and you do the midwives brew and the mile circuit and you drink your red raspberry leaf tea and you have sex and you get primal and you do all the things. Okay. So she gets swept, she goes home, she drinks the castor oil midwives brew. Again, I'll put the recipe in the show notes. And I'm not your doctor, so you got to okay this with your doctor. As an example, you cannot drink castor oil if you are a VBAC. So please do not do any of these things without talking to your healthcare provider. Blue Cohosh, some herbs, some red raspberry leaf tea, a strong brew, and she did some walking. And she just said the cramping and contraction started a couple hours later. So they started, and we kind of checked in until nighttime, and then they kind of, I would say, fizzled out. And then the next day, like she slept through the night, and then the next day they sort of picked up again for a couple of hours. And about, I don't know, 2 or 4 p.m., she was like, okay, this is definitely different. It's now 24 hours after that sweep. She's like, I definitely am in like more labor than prodromal labor. And we're like, Yahoo, finally, because we're now 42 weeks. That sweep and the castor oil and all the things just kind of pushed her over the edge into active labor. So we made a plan that when she was 3 to 4 minutes apart, she would call when she needed help and we would go help her. So then she listened to her doulas and she went to sleep. So we didn't hear from her again until 10-ish p.m. So she slept the afternoon away. She reported that there was a couple of contractions that kind of woke her up out of her sleep at like 3, 4, 5, 6. So before we get on to like the grand finale of this birth story, you guys, I want to recap. On November 17th, she started telling her doulas that she was cramping and she thought she was in labor. And then she didn't have a baby until 11 days after that. Okay, so that's how long prodromal labor can last. But she had a really ripe cervix when you're 3 centimeters dilated. And, I think she was 60% effaced and a -2 station. So all the things really helped get the baby engaged and to come down so that she would go into active labor. She called for help, I think, around midnight to 3 a.m. That part gets a little fuzzy since Colin works night shift. So I arrived at 7:30 in the morning and switched places with Colin. And when I switched places with Colin, like she was laying in bed and resting and doing amazing. And it was evident we were going to have a baby soon. So I told her, like, remember, this is a big baby, but who cares if you're moving your body? But like, she was laying, when I got there, she was laying in a hospital bed. So I'm like, I told her, you can have 30 minutes in this hospital bed, but then it is time to get up and get to work. So I let her sleep for like 30 minutes. And then we got up and we got to work and we labored. We did squats, lunges, tug of war on the toilet with the rebozo, all the things, hands and knees. I mean, every position that I have in my toolbox, we did. And her water ruptured spontaneously. It was very cool because there was a vernix all came out of her, and I had never seen vernix come out of the vagina with the amniotic fluid. I have seen lanugo, which is the little hairs that are on the baby, but I had never seen the actual vernix come out in chunks. There is a picture of that on my Instagram because she gave me permission, which is really cool. So if you want to see what vernix looks like in amniotic fluid, it's on the at Birth Story podcast on Instagram. So then we started playing tug of war. She got the urge to push at the peak of contractions. Then she slowly got the urge to push for longer and longer. And eventually she wanted to push from the time the contraction started to the time contraction ended. She never had another vaginal exam, though. There wasn't really like a need. There just wasn't really like a need for a vaginal exam. So she had her fetal ejection reflex. We knew she was complete and she started pushing on her own. So she pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed on the toilet with one leg up on a stool, then the next leg up on a stool. Then she played tug of war with me. Then we did squats and push. Then we did hands and knees and push. Then we did the squat bar and push. Then we did lunges and pushed. And eventually she found that those last couple pushes on her hands and knees in Kiko. And that's at the very end if you want to open the outlet of your pelvis versus the inlet of your pelvis, the outlet of your pelvis. You put your knees together and you kick your heels out. So knees in, Kikos, heels out or calves out is what it stands for. And then you like lean back into your push and you push. And that is how she delivered her beautiful baby. So I just wanted to come on real quick and tell you her story while I feel like doo doo brown. If anyone wants to send me some love, that would be amazing. Just send me a DM. I don't know when I'm going to be feeling better. But I wanted to tell you, Alexa, stop. See, this is an unedited version. There's my alarm to take more pain medicine. But I wanted to just share with you a little bit about what prodromal labor looks like and how you can think you're in labor every single day for 11 days. But really, your body's just warming up, getting you to 3 to 4 centimeters dilated before you even go into labor. So, my best advice is to just be patient. And like I said in the book, just do life until you're doing labor. And when you can't think about anything else except for labor, then you're in labor. And until then, just relax, get primal, distract your mind, find something to do. I love the mile circuit. That's at milecircuit.com. I love abdominal lift and tucks, baths, and every now and then a membrane sweep if you are in prodromal labor for 10 days and your body just wants to be pushed over the edge, then that is something that can push you over the edge. If you do a membrane sweep, then I do recommend talking to your provider about drinking the midwives brew or castor oil and taking some blue cohosh. Those are all things that as a doula and not your doula, I can't tell you to do, but I can tell you to ask your healthcare provider about them. Okay, until Thursday, tune in because remember, I'm going to talk, or I already recorded it, but it's hilarious with two of my friends and one of the medical professionals to set us straight on like what really happens when you get, a hysterectomy or a tubal, or, we asked some really inappropriate questions and we found out that really it's the patriarchy, why we don't know any of these things about our bodies. So I hope you'll tune in on Thursday. And thank you for giving me the generosity of putting an episode out today that is unedited. And the sound is just on my phone. And now my kids are walking in. Love you. Bye, guys.
Don't forget, I'm here to help be your virtual doula and help you prepare and plan for the birth that you want, no matter what that looks like. With 17 years of experience as a veteran birth doula, witnessing every stage of labor and every minute of labor for my clients from the earliest beginning twinges all the way through meeting their babies. I am here to walk you through the hospital policies and procedures and navigate the twists and turns. Whether you are hoping for an unmedicated birth, a medicated birth, to have an induction, an unplanned induction, or a planned or unplanned cesarean, Birth Story Academy helps you prepare for all of it. I can't wait to see you in class. Remember, head to birthstory.com to enroll in Birth Story Academy so I know you got to class from the podcast and enjoy 50% off using code BirthStoryPodcast. Thanks for listening to Doula Diaries. Before you go, don't forget to check out Anja Health at anjahealth.com, ANJA health.com, and really look into cord blood and tissue banking. As a parent of a child with cerebral palsy, I know how potent and powerful stem cell transplants can be. And I don't have the opportunity to do that for my child. So I ask you, as you're planning and preparing for the birth that you want, no matter what that looks like, that you will consider cord blood and tissue banking, because we just don't know how our birth is going to go, or if our children are going to get childhood leukemia, cancer, heart disease, liver disease, diabetes. Cord, blood, and tissue banking is the future of science. I am so excited to see in 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, how our children might be able to use their cord, blood, and tissue stem cells in order to heal their adult bodies. Isn't that so cool to think about? All right, anjahealth.com. Use code BIRTHSTORY for $100 off. There is also a special link in the show notes to help you get there. Thank you for letting me share about Anja and Doula Diaries. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode.